Welcome back. Last time we talked about gaslighting with Sarah Morales, and it was a phenomenal interview. I've had so many people reach out, male and female, and talk about the kind of breathe out moment where they just said, I'm not crazy, I'm not imagining things. Today we're going to continue what I really believe is a necessary but very riveting conversation on how to help both of you, those that have been gaslit and those that have struggled with gaslighting and are willing to take an honest look at themselves and how they can change, and actually, and this is probably a big one, how they can help try and repair the damage that they have caused to their spouse or partner because of gaslighting. So thank you for coming in for part two.
Thank you.
I think what you bring to the table is so freeing to predominantly the betrayed spouse, but also to the unfaithful. And so much of what you shared helped so many. And so today, I want to really ask you some harder hitting questions, because I think deep in the heart and the mind of the betrayed spouse is the question, is there any hope for the gaslighter?
Yes.
Like, can they change? Can they sober up? Can they come out of this dysfunctional pattern of manipulation and betrayal? I mean, is there hope for the gaslighter?
Absolutely. I do think that as long as someone is willing and in real recovery, I think they can absolutely heal from themselves from being a gaslighter. And one of the reasons I say this is I actually believe that everybody gaslights. That weirds some people out. And I know especially those of us who have experienced gaslighting in a really intense way are like, no, not everybody gaslights, because that can feel like a diminishment to the trauma that we've experienced because of gaslighting. Like, on top of the betrayal, on top of any addictive behaviors, like the gaslighting itself causes trauma. So, but it is on a scale.
Right.
And so people do it unaware. And in fact, the most common reason that I see people gaslighting is actually a shame response. So it can be a triggering thing for the partner when they see their person gaslighting, when they're supposed to be in recovery, because they're like, why are they gaslighting me? Like, are they really like not sober? And more often than not, it's because it's a shame response. It's not because they're back into infidelity or any addictive behaviors or anything like that. It's a shame response.
So they, the gaslighter, are experiencing shame.
Yes.
We say shame says I am something wrong or bad. Guilt is I've done, or if you come from faith, conviction says I've done something. So walk me through. Their shame is triggered, maybe in a situation where the betrayed says, you know, I still struggle with reminders and triggers. My thought life is a mess. Okay, that triggers the gaslighter's shame.
Absolutely.
And then what happens?
Well, and then because if I am struggling with a shame core, right, I can't handle feeling like I let somebody down again. So, and this happens lightning fast. Like it's not aware, right? It happens lightning fast. And so the automatic defensive response is, well, I can't take this, so I need to make it be about somebody else, right?
So we blame, we deflect, we shift.
Yes. We have a term for that in our app sets. It's called DARVO, and it's about redirecting or reversing who's the victim and who's the offender in the situation. So,
and that's key. I don't want to rush, because I think probably 75% of us unfaithful do that. We redirect because we can't allow the heat to be put on us because we don't know how. It's not always that we're this wicked, terrible person. It's sometimes, quite often, we don't know how to handle what we're feeling, and our defense mechanism is to go, well, you know what, Samantha? If you'd have had more sex, I wouldn't have cheated.
Yes.
Rather than going, you know, I'm a selfish person, and I'm trying to work on that because I've made this life and marriage about me.
Yep.
That took me probably 5-6 years of incredible therapy and time and prayer and gut-wrenching tears to get to that point. That's not a realistic thing if it's a month or two or even 4 months in. But expand on what you were elaborating on how to help the gaslighter slowly change the pattern that they're stuck in.
I'm so glad you asked that. For years, as I've been teaching on gaslighting, I would have the betrayed partners come up to me and like, this is all great, but when are you going to teach the gaslighter how not to gaslight? And my response was always like, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Well, I finally worked on it. And I'm trying to broach that topic now too. And for me, it's not just, well, let me back up and say that to me, it starts with self-awareness. So and that's why I qualified it with, if somebody is in real recovery and if they're working on things, this should be somewhat of a natural side effect, right? Because as you're working on your stuff, you're getting more in touch with your feelings and your emotions and the things that were kind of numbed out or ignored or things like, as you're getting more self-aware, you're going to slow down. And in times when previously you might have had that shame response and be like, I can't handle this. It's like, okay, I'm having a shame response. Like, I need to slow down.
Right. And maybe just not talk, right? Listen to the betrayed man or woman share their heart.
Yep.
Because we want to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think gaslighters are masters at trying to fix it, right? Because if we can fix it, then we don't have to talk about it anymore. And we said, hey, I fixed you. This was your issue anyway. So self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think if you're trying to really get healthy, you're willing. You have a willing heart to say, I got to get healthy.
Yep.
So if they're willing and they're working on being present, which is a great 12-step term on being present, what else are some of the steps that they can go through to continue to I think, and you can disagree with this, I think it's wean off the gaslighting, right?
Yeah, no, I would say it because you're rewiring, right?
Okay.
You're having to rewire your brain, the patterns that you've had for probably decades.
Absolutely.
Except for some of us. But it's just, it's self-awareness. And my biggest thing with that is the curious why. Why am I feeling this way? What is going on? Just getting curious. That's a huge step that I try to teach people.
That's excellent.
I'm noticing things, right? Like either a physical response or emotional response. Why? What is going on inside of me?
That is so much of a vital piece to the puzzle, because a lot of the audience know that I went through a lot of healing for childhood trauma. And I hated when my therapist would say, you need to be curious about why you're feeling. I was like, that is such a stupid word. But I realized I didn't like that because I didn't want to look at myself. I mean, I was healed and I was in a great place. Samantha and I were doing very well. But I didn't want to go down that road because I was afraid.
Yeah.
Do you think many gaslighters are afraid?
Absolutely. I think fear is a big one, especially fear of rejection. And so that's actually one of the third parts of what I teach people about not gaslighting is you have to be willing to be vulnerable. And that's scary, right? So let's say I do the first two steps. I get curious and I find out for myself that I'm afraid that my person is upset with me. And if I admit again that, yeah, I messed up and I'm sorry that I hurt you, that maybe this will be the time that they'll be done with me, right? So I don't want to admit that. So I get to those two steps.
That's so good.
Right? The third step is saying, you know what? I have to be vulnerable. I have to tell this person that these are the fears that I have, right? So I have to be willing to say, you know what? I'm terrified right now. That
That's
if
so
I
good.
am honest and tell you what I'm really thinking and what I'm really feeling, that you'll either get more mad or, I'm afraid of that rejection piece, those kinds of things. So actually getting vulnerable is the third part.
And it's such a, I guess I'll call it a catch-22, because some of us, included, we could use that and go, Samantha, I just don't want to be vulnerable because I'm afraid. Now we're victimizing it, right?
Yeah.
And so, because that's going to happen. I mean, I have people watch these videos and some people are just, unfortunately, so unhealthy, they will take it and they'll use this. They'll go to their spouse and say, I'm just afraid you're going to reject me. And it's not true issues of the heart, because there isn't empathy, there isn't a genuine humility. But in that moment, what does the betrayed do? How do they digest that moment and not feel like they're using this false vulnerability, right, to get over on them?
Yes. And so that's where I would go to that 1-2 punch of the power shift thing, which is I can hear that and I can acknowledge it. I don't have to let go of my perspective, right? Because if it's gaslighting, I can then so engage in empathy that I forget that I'm wounded too.
Right.
Right. And then I feel taken advantage of, and then I feel like I'm a victim all over again, and all of these things, instead of saying, okay, he's feeling afraid or she's feeling afraid of being rejected. That makes sense. I still know that this is how I'm feeling, and holding both.
That's phenomenal. You can hold both.
Mm-hmm.
You can affirm their fear while still taking care of you.
Yes, maintaining your boundaries, especially. Like, to me, that's key, because if it's a little bit more overt gaslighting, the person is probably doing it to not have to take responsibility for something,
Right.
or try to manipulate the person into doing something or believing something. So if I'm maintaining my boundaries, that gaslighting won't work, and they won't continue to keep doing that tactic. So I keep myself safe by having that awareness of that power shift and saying, okay, I can't tell right now if this is genuine or manipulative. So I'm going to acknowledge, I'm going to stay grounded in my reality and in my truth and protect myself with healthy boundaries and wait and see how this plays out.
So tell some of the betrayed, what are some healthy boundaries? Just practically, what are some ways to boundary? Because we're big on that,
Yes.
especially in a very volatile situation with gaslighting, manipulation. What are just a couple of practical ways to establish some boundaries for the betrayed?
Okay, yeah. The one that I'm into the most right now, I go through seasons where, like, this is my favorite one. You ever have that? You have your favorite things. Right now, my favorite one is don't make concessions.
Interesting.
Yes. So I think that that's a healthy boundary that we put on ourselves. So what that looks like, I'm glad you asked. What that looks like is a lot of partners that I've worked with, and maybe you can confirm this, are usually high empaths, right? So it's kind of a little bit like what we were just talking about, where, it can be anything that the person might be saying, where they're trying to kind of play that victim card. Like, feel sorry for me because my day was so hard, or feel sorry for me because I had so much trauma in my childhood, or feel sorry for me. So that means you shouldn't have as hard of a boundary, as firm as a boundary as you are placing with me. I'm doing the best I can, so you're asking too much, or all of these kinds of things. So as high empaths, we kind of shift to their point of view, and we say, okay, well, that makes sense. Like, a rough childhood would make it harder to do this, and maybe I am asking for too much. And so we start to make those concessions.
Maybe it is too early in the process. Maybe he is damaged.
Yes.
Maybe I've not had enough sex with him, or not been a great encourager.
Yes.
Or maybe I haven't made enough money, right?
Yes. So we make those concessions and we say, okay, I will relax. I won't stay in the place where I am with the boundaries that I need.
I won't enforce them.
I won't enforce them. So maybe, for example, I know a lot of people that are working on infidelity or addiction, they might have a period of abstinence. Right, as a boundary. And so that might be a concession that they would make, right? Like, well, this is going on and I feel lonely and I want to connect, and, all of these things that sound great, right? And so we shift to that perspective because we're high empaths, and we say, okay, well, I understand, like, he is working on stuff, or she is working on stuff, and, it would be helpful to engage and all. So we make those concessions, and we don't stay connected to our boundaries that are keeping us safe for good reason.
And then we end up resenting ourselves later.
And not trusting ourselves.
And that's a great point. Not just resenting, but not trusting ourselves, which fuels the cycle, right?
Absolutely.
Now, oftentimes, I want to switch gears a little bit. People stuck in this pattern will go to a therapist or a pastor or a coach or a rabbi that is very well-meaning, and they will describe what's happening. And it will be flipped because that authority figure doesn't understand gaslighting. And there's a couple of things that really then happen, right? So speak to what happens when these fragile people are mishandled or misdiagnosed. Because I think it's important that they feel validated in maybe their confusion and hurt.
Absolutely. I think that's a crucial thing, because if you're going to a helping professional, again, whether that's a therapist or a layperson, pastor, whatever, and they don't understand, you need to be empowered as that betrayed person to say, this person doesn't get it. I can see that they don't get it, and I need to find somebody who does, right? Because otherwise what happens is we get re-traumatized, right? Because this person is supposed to be safe, and now not only is my gaslighter gaslighting me, but now my helping professional is gaslighting me too. So where do I go that's safe? So it's re-traumatizing. It is confusing, right? Because you already going in vulnerable, like you said, kind of sketchy. Like, I think I know what my reality is, and I'm going to trust that this helping professional is going to see me.
And they don't.
And they don't. So then that's confusing. Like, wait, like, now I'm shaken. Like, any confidence that I might have had has now been thrown
Absolutely.
out the
Out
the
to the
window,
wayside.
kind of a thing. So those two things are crucial. Like being aware, like if my helping professional isn't seeing me and hearing that this dynamic is going on, and I'm leaving the session further confused, that's a sign that the therapist or helping professional isn't getting the dynamic of the gaslighting going on. You shouldn't be more confused. You should have more clarity, and you should feel seen.
Something I've started doing, because I think you have affirmed literally thousands of people today. I think you've helped comfort so many of them, and you weren't extremely hard on the gaslighter. I know for me, I wouldn't have responded to that. I would have just said, "Oh, here we go again." But the fact that you were so kind and genuine, what I'd like to ask you to do is to look into the camera and just speak to primarily the victims of gaslighting.
Okay.
I mean, share your heart. You've been where you're at. Part of the power of what we do is to look into this camera to people all over the world, on all different continents, who feel what we are feeling and really give them hope. So take a few minutes and share with these victims that there is hope. Share your heart with them.
I remember a few months before my discovery actually happened, and the gaslighting had gotten so intense in my own relationship that I had a gaslighting episode happen, and I got in my car, drove to the nearest grocery store, and just sat in the parking lot and wept. I wept and wept because I was so distraught. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I called my mom and I said, "Mom, I literally feel like I'm going crazy. I don't understand. Why does this keep happening?" That distraught place seems like a really far away from me now. And I want to convey that hope to you, that you can heal. You can find yourself the same way I have. I don't feel like I'm anybody special. I don't have any special brain or anything that's going to make me set aside from something that you can discover as well, something that you can own and hold for yourself. It takes hard work, I'm not gonna lie, and it takes time. It's a very complex, multidimensional thing, but if you are desiring that, you absolutely can heal from it and find yourself and have really healthy relationships.